Hello everybody and welcome. We are out for another ATV ride today, just a little ways southwest of Phoenix. We are trying to take advantage of these cooler temperatures and get in as much desert exploring as possible before summer inevitably hits pretty soon. Today, we'll be heading south through some scenic mountains to the historic Buckeye Copper Mine. There, we'll check out some old foundations before continuing onto some rougher and more scenic trails along Woosley Peak before making it back to the staging area. We began our journey just a couple miles off of Old Highway 80 along Agua Caliente Road. We parked and began getting the ATVs unloaded from the trailer. Today was forecast to be a pretty mild spring day. With highs in the low 80s and a nice breeze, it was a great day to ride. To the south of us were the Gila Bend Mountains and Woosley Peak, off in the distance, which is the direction we would be heading very soon. To the north of us, a large solar farm, Palo Verde nuclear generating station, and Saddle Mountain lay far off in the distance. The ATVs were fueled up, tires checked, and ready to go just a few minutes later. We loaded up and got our helmets on as we set out to leave the staging area. Right away, we briefly followed the wide and smooth Agua Caliente Road to the west. Shortly thereafter, we split off onto a lesser trail to go south. The trail remained easy but narrower and had occasional washouts along the way. The road quickly approached a set of small hills as we continued to the south. At around the 4-mile mark, the trail split and we stayed to the left to head towards the mine and its ruins. The trail loops around the mountain back to this point, or continues south along a rougher track, which is what we would end up doing in a little bit. The trail climbed a small, rougher hill before reaching the Buckeye Copper Mine site. Our first stop at the mine was on the hillside separated from the main camp. A faint side trail ended at a clearing with a great view and a pretty intact cement foundation. This would be the first of several foundations scattered around the mining camp. This one appeared to be the remains of some kind of house. The cement flooring remains in pretty remarkable condition actually, which means that it probably wasn't built all that long ago. The walls, which have since collapsed, were made up of cinder blocks, and the house even contained what appears to be a nice north-facing porch. Evidence of indoor plumbing and what may have even been an indoor shower remain as well. The view from this former house was pretty incredible. Not only did they have a view of the mine ruins on the hillside nearby, but they could also look north across the wide valley. Today, that valley has been filled in by Palo Verde, I-10, and a few other things. We returned back to the trail and continued to the main ruins a short distance away. We parked at the main shaft of the mine and got out on foot to do some exploring. The mine shaft, which is fenced off quite well, and numerous other building foundations remain here on site at the Buckeye Copper Mine. This mine is gated off very well, but isn't really that deep. The shaft goes down maybe 15 feet before cutting back into the hillside. Concrete and anchors remain above, likely signifying some kind of headframe or winch sat above the hole in order to pull material out. What appears to be the mill site remains just north of the hole. Various metal pieces, anchors, and artifacts remain around this building. Further up above the mill is a smaller cement structure. This one appears to be some kind of cistern and probably was used to hold water at one point, although half of it is filled with a lean-to that looks like it could have been an impromptu explosives locker. Numerous other cement foundations remain scattered throughout the property, varying in size and purpose. Serious prospecting here at the Buckeye Copper Mine appeared to start as early as 1960. Various prospects and pits were dug in the surrounding hills. The local volcanics and faults in the area around the mine make for some interesting geology that not only looks really cool, but also produced a fair share of precious commodities. By 1961, work was beginning at the mine, and rocks pulled out from here were used in a newly constructed Phoenix area mall built the same year, which of course was the Christown Mall. Work continued and at least 3 people were living and working at the mine, which may have included the brothers who owned the mine, John and Clyde Lemons. This is likely when most of these buildings were constructed on the property. Copper was the primary mineral here and assayed at around 2 to 3% in places. Trace amounts of gold and silver were also dug up. Uranium was also found in small quantities as well, but wasn't economically viable. The deepest of the shafts here at Buckeye Copper were drilled to around 200 feet, with another reaching around 50 feet deep. The Lemons brothers appealed to Phelps Dodge with some of their ore samples. However, at the time, the massive company was already full up on copper suppliers. The mine never became the massive commercial success the owners had imagined, and it eventually was abandoned altogether sometime around 1972 or 73. After walking around the ruins of the mining camp, we hopped back on the ATVs and continued on the trail. Upon leaving the mine, more cement foundations dotted the terrain as we rode along. We headed south around the edge of the hill. After passing through a junction, we climbed a steep hill and soon arrived on top of a moderate tailings pile. In the middle of the pile, which appears to have been filled in at one point, sits a large cement foundation, which was possibly used to hold equipment like a motor or a winch. While there were no mine adits in this immediate area, the close proximity to the main shaft and other surrounding prospects indicate that work was also done on this side of the hill. A total of 62 mining claims were established surrounding the Buckeye Copper Mine, so there were numerous other mines and prospects active at one point or another. From here, we continued downhill to the junction south of the mine and proceeded further south towards Woosley Peak. The trail got rougher and steeper. For the next couple of miles, the trail was rocky, narrow, and rutted out in places. We climbed before reaching a scenic pass. The view from the clearing offered a glimpse at the hills surrounding Buckeye Copper Mine and now offered an unobstructed view of the 3,200-foot Woosley Peak just south of us. From the pass, the trail stayed rough as it headed downhill. The scenery remained pretty fantastic as we crossed a few good trail washouts. Past the 7-mile mark now, we crossed a dry wash and stopped at a windmill and well. This was Buckeye Copper Mine Well, obviously named after the mine we had just visited. The windmill spun intermittently, and the pump was even working too. Despite everything still spinning and working, all of the surrounding tanks and pipes were bone dry. The surrounding desert around, though, had gotten plenty of water from the recent rains, as the wildflowers bloomed everywhere. This well is located on the north border of the Woosley Peak Wilderness, which spans over 60,000 acres of volcanic hills and desert terrain just to our south. We grabbed a quick snack, checked out an old bowling ball, and got back on the trail. From the well, we continued northeast. This road would eventually loop back to Agua Caliente Road. Things remained rocky and bumpy for a little bit, getting progressively easier as we moved along. Pretty soon we had cleared the desert hills and were now cruising through the open desert, past another well and underneath some power lines. Eventually we arrived back at Agua Caliente Road and proceeded west to get back to our trailer. The fast-moving section got us back to our staging area in no time. Roughly 15 miles later, we had covered a fun loop through some new and really scenic ground not far from Phoenix. While not an overly huge operation, the Buckeye Copper Mine was an interesting stop with a few neat things to check out and an even more interesting backstory. Numerous additional trails allow you to further explore the area, which is really rugged and surprisingly remote and little traveled. The loop we rode took around 2 to 3 hours and requires 4-wheel drive and high clearance in a couple of spots. Otherwise, it is actually a fairly easy route, and lower clearance vehicles could make it to the mine, but probably shouldn't go any further. After getting the ATVs loaded back up, it was time for us to hit the road. Thanks for tagging along on today's adventure, and we'll see you on the next one.